Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer. This is Strange Mosaic, and I am fresh off a week off, so I am feeling rested and ready to go. And we have a guest that you all have been asking over and over and over for, and he is finally back. So look out for Charlie. Welcome back to Strange Mosaic. It's nice to talk to you again, my friend.
You too.
I have to tell you, I have gotten more requests for you to return than anyone else I've ever done shows with.
Really?
Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, like I get a lot of requests for specific people that I've never talked with yet, right? But in terms of people that have been on the show before or even multiple times, you've been missed. I know you've been back doing your own recordings for a little while, but you had taken a long time off. So I know you've been missed and people have been waiting for you to come back. So I'm sure everybody will be really happy to hear this show, and I'm excited to chat with you. So let's get it on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Right on.
Cool. All right. So, you were kind of out of the loop a little bit in terms of producing content. I know you're always paying attention to what's going on. But whenever we have what seems at the time like the chance or the need to step away for a while, the online world goes on without us. And then when we come back, it's either so much to catch up on or so much to clean up after.
Yeah, yeah, or it changes or something, some weird thing pops up, that just absolutely kind of changes the landscape, and
Yeah.
it's whether it's hyped up, whether it's real, whatever. But yeah, absolutely. It changed within that short period that I was gone. I would kind of check in on it, check in on what was going on. And
Yeah.
it was constantly just different, different, different.
Yeah. So one of the things I've noticed over the last few years, like since we did two shows together about 2 to 3 years ago, something like that, right? And,
Hmm.
most of my long-term listeners that I interact with, they they interject your work and your vernacular into conversations in a way that it doesn't surprise me, but I'm like, wow, they actually really get it, right? They sometimes they'll bring your stuff up in an area like I'm talking about something new or different, and I hadn't thought about it from your perspective, and they'll bring it up, right? So that should be heartwarming that people are really getting it at a level that they can use it to analyze other things.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really
But
cool.
but for those people who need sort of just a short refresher on what you do and sort of the state of things right now, like what is the state of the acoustic weaponry that we live with all the time, every day?
uh wow, the state. It is well, it's everywhere. People have a lot of people that are out of the loop have an idea that when somebody is having something happen to them, that it is like a beam, following them, or there are people in the bushes pointing something at them, that kind of idea, that it's somebody in close proximity, where it doesn't matter. The signal is everywhere. You can pick this up in caves, in the air, in the water. You can pick it up. It doesn't matter what home you're in, you can pick it up, whether people are feeling it, experiencing it, whatever, it's there. So it's just a wide, vast signal. And it seems to be something that is related to HARP. And it seems to be related to the Schumann resonance and hijacking the Schumann resonance in ELF terms.
So when you say hijacking the Schumann resonance, because I've noticed, like, since I started paying attention to, alternative understandings of reality, so 20 plus years now, right? That
Right.
it seems almost like on a cyclical basis that a focus on either the Schumann resonance or like solar flares and how it connects to the Schumann resonance will come up again, and there'll be a period of fixation about it. And this is oftentimes when you'll hear people talking about, oh, the power grid's going to go down, so buy your storable food and all of this kind
Yep.
of stuff, right?
Yep.
um,
Selling generators.
but specifically when you say like harp and the Schumann resonance and the hijacking of that, what do you mean?
I mean, so the Schumann resonance is 7.83 hertz, or it used to be. And it used
Mhm,
to be a constant, like a steady, it really depended on how strong it was,
mhm.
and it would have swells in areas, or you might have what you might consider like an ELF storm. Now it seems it's a lot of different frequencies, and they seem to be using it more as a carrier wave than
Mhm.
for a lot of different ELF than just 7.83 hertz. So there's a lot going on, and there's pulses, and it's rising. They're getting it really hot. But then harp is related to that too, because what they would do is they would and I don't mean like the old school harp, because there are a lot of harp like locations on Earth now. It's not just that one place in Alaska that used to exist. What they would do is they would beam or shoot radio waves at the ionosphere and bounce them back. And when they bounced it back, what it would turn into, it would create like an interference signal, so to speak, that would be an ELF signal. And they could do a lot with this. This is like through Earth ELF. They could find water, they could find oil, they could find underground bunkers, anything that anybody dug out, preppers, you could find all of that stuff underneath the ground with ELF. It basically operates like a camera. And I think they discovered when they did that they could also use the Schumann resonance and use it as a carrier wave and just go through Earth, take it over. And then that way you've got a complete sort of ground radar, basically. And with that, you've also got sound waves coming off it. A lot of stuff is being what's the word? Transduced. And it's being transduced into actual sound. So we have literal physical vibrations, kind of like what happened to what was that city in Oregon that I made that video about? Uh, it's near Portland. But anyway, these people in the late 70s started getting really sick there, and they were feeling vibrations and stuff, and all the radio waves that were being you know blasted over that area as a test was transducing into sound. So it's all part of this one system, and that's basically it.
So let me just see if I understand this correctly. The Schumann resonance, the actual Schumann resonance is still 7.83, but what they're
Yeah,
using the natural, or if there's any such thing as natural, but the one that we're originally familiar with, that is still what it is. But instead of that just being its own thing isolated, they're using that as like a foundation to support like other sub resonances or frequencies. So it would be
yeah,
like Schumann resonance A, Schumann resonance B, Schumann resonance C, and they're using that as like the foundation, and then they're creating like a modified version to bounce off of that.
yeah, like using it as
Okay.
a carrier signal in the way that sort of in the way that somebody would use a jammer. So if you were to jam a cell phone, I would uh I would turn up the cell phone jammer. Let's say it's in my house, right? And nobody within 3 houses could make cell phone calls, because you're overriding that frequency with a more powerful frequency. And that's basically what they're doing. And
Okay.
it's what it appears to be to me. So far, that's what I've got out of it, because it really is everywhere. I mean, it's in the ground, it's everywhere. I've picked it up everywhere.
So just out of curiosity, because I don't know if I've told you this before, but have you ever seen the television show called Dark?
I don't think so.
Okay, I think that I watched it kind of after when we did our shows together, so I don't think I would have told you about this. So it's an excellent German TV series. It's available on Netflix and it's dubbed in English. So the vocals are already in English. You don't have to look at the subtitles.
Right.
And it's about a small town that gets a nuclear reactor, right? And all of the sort of oddities that start to develop um, sort of around that, right? And we're talking from, all kinds of stuff like missing children mysteries, time travel, dimensional travel, like nuclear fallout cancers, right? They're telling us sort of, there's different characters that are sort of wound all around this, right?
Hmm.
But it all seems to start with someone starting to, people that them starting to fiddle with fusing atoms and splitting atoms, right? And what, like, all of the things that sort of come after that, right? The chaos that sort of creates in a variety of different ways, right?
Right.
So in my own, the way that I sort of look at things and tell my stories and understand things is kind of synchronistic, right? I kind of use my personal narrative, not because like I think I'm special or it's more important, because it's the only one I have a complete understanding.
Right.
I live my
Right.
life.
Absolutely. Right. But you use it, you're using it the right way.
Right. I'm
So
like,
understood.
everybody else can go out and do this too, right? Like, I think that like a lot of people are like, wow, Emily, your life is fascinating. Like, how come so many crazy things happen to you? And I don't think any more crazy things happen to me than anyone else. I've just learned how to pay attention and notice when they're happening, right? And not sort of write them off as like, well, that's weird, right?
Right.
And so I grew up in Chatsworth, California, which is a suburb of Los Angeles and is highly connected to Hollywood and movie making, based on the fact that like a movie studio was there that like to make like old westerns and stuff like pretty early, right?
Yeah.
Like outdoor area that they used. So it's heavily connected to Hollywood and then also to science and technology because first Rocketdyne and then Boeing have a large base located in the mountains of Chatsworth where one thing that they say is going on may or may not have been going on there, and then lots of other things that I suspect have been going on there. And then also, like, this was where the quote unquote Manson tunnel was, that the whole narrative surrounding Charlie Manson and sort of chaos and MK Ultra and all of that kind of stuff, like
Hmm.
heavily spun around during the 60s and 70s, right? And it's also an ancient Indian burial ground that lots of people who are into astronomy and space exploration, I'll put that in quotation marks, find to be one of the most important locations related to our relationship with space in the world, which is weird because you don't usually hear of Chatsworth when you're talking about space. You hear of like Cape Canaveral and,
Yep.
blah, 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 right? But what's interesting is that the Indian cave paintings there, if you don't pay attention to what the anthropologists tell you they mean, and you just literally look at them, and then look at the current technologies of nuclear reactors, particle accelerators, Chernikov radiation chambers, things like that. That's what the drawings look like.
Interesting.
And
Yeah. I don't
this
think I've seen those.
there's a street right outside of this base where Boeing is. I can show them to you sometime if you like. But the street. The reason I'm bringing this up is because just outside of like where you, it's in a very sort of rural suburban area, and you go farther back into the hills until you get to a place where you can't go past without stopping at the Boeing booth. And if you have a pass, you can go back. You can't, right?
Hmm.
But one of the streets right outside of that is called Schumann, spelled exactly like Schumann resonance,
Hmm. Now
right?
that is interesting. Right.
And so to me, like if and again, I'm not saying that Chatsworth is the one and only most important place in the world. I'm saying there are probably these spots all over the planet, that there are a
Absolutely.
network of locations, right? But that whatever they're doing inside the ground there, it is from inside of there that this resonance is either emanating or being tinkered with or toyed with or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the number of things that this tinkering, again, whether they're tinkering with something that humans created or whether they're tinkering with something that was there naturally and they're just trying to figure it out or recreate it or piggyback on it or whatever, right? Like the amount of things that you can do with this, like including everything you've ever talked about, right? With the using acoustics to surveil or to weaponize, right? Any of that kind of stuff. But I'm thinking like even going as far as things like what a human probably misunderstands and calls time travel or dimensional travel or teleportation or disassembly, what are they called? Like molecular disassembly and reassembly, all of this kind of stuff. That like that that's the level of magic almost that's a high level understanding of sonics and optics can take you to.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay, so we're on board here together.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. So I would love for you to watch that TV series Dark. Because to me, like what I'm understanding your work at this point as part of like the ambient sound network of that reality, right? Like if you are creating sound fields or energy like fields or whatever it is, bubbles, let's say, right? That because they generally have some sort of frequency boundary at somewhere, right?
Right.
But what can happen inside of them is different than what can happen outside of them. And the sort of acoustics of that contained space or or even the acoustics of the space outside of that boundary kind of can inform you of what state you are in, like what the possibilities, like what all is going on here, right? Instead of focusing on the sounds as the entire point of something, it's like, what do the sounds I'm hearing tell me about all of the things that are going on?
Right.
Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah. 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 It's all, I used to call it two cans in a string, where
Yeah.
kids would, pull two like soup cans on a string and then talk back and forth,
Mm-hmm.
and the sound would carry. And that's just because the frequency is able to run along on the string and then hit the can and reverberate. You have two objects, and it doesn't matter where they're at. You get an area like what you're talking about, and you can use that to basically manipulate everything on Earth, because you're using it as a transceiver. And if you're doing that, you're capable of a lot. I mean, and people don't realize it, but you really are capable of doing a lot. You've got, for example, you get a lot of these people that think they're that, or claim they're targeted or whatever, right? And they feel, they're in bed and they feel pinches, and they feel, different things going on. They're messing with these people's nervous systems and
Uh-huh.
doing things, testing from a location that is thousands of miles away. A lot of it is AI controlled anyway, but they're feeling that, and that's exactly what they're ultimately going for, is what you're talking about. So all these little things that are happening to people are tests,
Uh-huh.
and they think they're being tortured and tracked and this and that, and it's really research. It's being done for the science.
Yeah.
you know it's really what it is. And you get two rocks, doesn't matter how far away they are from each other, if they vibrate at the same frequency, they vibrate at the same frequency.
Yep.
And you can do a lot with that. I mean, a lot. And people don't realize what a lot is. You can basically connect them, uh have them do the exact same things. There's a lot of what people would think is magic within that. Absolutely.
So, okay, so what you just said, you said about the things that you focus on, the same thing that I've been saying about areas that I've been highly focused on for a number of years, right? And you were
Mhm.
just saying that they do it for the science and the research, right? Which
the
is
the artificial side of it, yes,
correct,
totally.
right? So, like, the point is not to torture so and so in their bed, right? Although there's definitely the awareness that it can be used for that. And upon
Right.
occasion, it probably is,
And
right?
it is, because, and
Yeah.
here's why: they have to keep the person the person has to be in a high elevated sense of stress to keep them entrained to all of it. So they'll tell them, you know, if the person is experiencing V2K or voice to skull or voice of God weapons, they'll tell them what they're doing and why they're doing it. You know, a voice will say that and then it will
Right.
happen, right? And
Yeah.
that is to keep them thinking that, you know, somebody is doing this to me, you know, two houses down or whatever, and it's
Right.
not. And that keeps their stress level up and keeps them paying attention. Where if they don't pay attention, they start to lose that entrainment pretty quickly. And it
But
will,
the purpose very rarely is just to torture them.
right,
There's an ongoing open air experiment to see what happens if we do this. What if we do this? What if we mix this with that? What if we turn this up a little bit and turn down that a little bit? Right? Like
correct.
it's it's an exploratory sort of science.
Yeah,
Right.
the feelings that people are getting, all of that is totally experimental. The voice aspect of it, when you get into that, the acoustics, that has been totally weaponized, and they're totally using it to, for example, subvert the mental health industry, to get people in fear so that they want a police state because there's you know, active shooters, there's stabbers everywhere, you know, that kind of crap. So, you know, there are other aspects to it that are already weaponized, but the physical symptoms that people are experimenting or experiencing or feeling something or having some kind of weird symptom going on, that's all for the science right now. Absolutely.
Okay, I try to explain this to people when, like, I've most of my research has been into things connected to like MK Ultra lesser known subprojects, right? Like mind control and the technologies or the sort of areas that have been explored that are even to this point really mostly off the books, like not talking about like Monarch or super soldiers or that kind of like the weirder stuff
Right.
that there's less like books and documentaries about and shit, right? And at a certain point I reckon two things happen sort of simultaneously, but they're connected. Is that I realized that I had to become less outraged by the things that I discovered, right? Because once you get into that sort of outrage in this field, the need to do something about it, that stops your looking deeper into how it actually works or what actually is being done, right?
Totally.
You
Totally.
become
Yeah, I
reactive.
remember getting so really quickly, I'm sorry, but I remember getting so mad about it that I said, I'm not going to stop until I can make this audible for anybody to hear. And I was really mad about it, but then I had to calm myself down because I was like, dude, I'm not going to get anything done like this. I
You
was
can't
just
get
so
anything done.
infuriated. Right. Yeah, I was infuriated by it.
You can't get anything done, right? And so like so I had to get to the point where I could look at all this like really disturbing stuff and like ask myself that question, like what else could be the reason why someone would do some of these things, right? And
Right.
so much of the like kind of MK Ultra, like the weirder, more esoteric aspects of that mind control space in recent years have been sort of subverted on some levels by like pedophilia and Pizzagate kind of narratives and
Yep.
what they're doing to the children type
Yep.
of thing, that like all of the true understanding of like how all of this stuff works like got completely halted, right? And so I started to just really like back away emotionally from engaging in it from that perspective, and just again looking for like alternative explanations. And I started to realize that if you were interested in understanding power in genetics, right?
Hmm.
How a person's genetic makeup would react to a specific environment or a specific stimulus, right? Um, like that actually like would match up to some of the same things that people describe as satanic ritual abuse or torture or things like that, right? And
Absolutely.
and it doesn't, this, none of this is me saying that I think it's okay that that's done, right? But if
Right.
someone is trying to conduct quote unquote science, if someone's trying to understand what happens when you do this to that, that is a completely different motivation, although possibly no more noble than I'm just disgusting and I want to do dark things to little kids. So
Exactly. Exactly.
when you think that so we have this scenario where so many of the truth community have come to the conclusion that like half the world are like weird pedophiles or into satanic crazy shit or whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
And when you get into the narrative from that perspective, where you go looking for answers is completely different. Like where you go looking for like some perverted old man is generally different than where you go to look for someone conducting a science experiment.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
when you go to the place you think you're going to find some perverted weird person doing weird shit, right? You might find some lascivious information that gets people all titillated because it's like a dopamine hit, but you're not actually learning anything about what the knowledge gained from doing some of these things it actually is.
Right. They're cattle shoots. They get these people down these cattle shoots and they don't realize it ever. And then they think that they've hit like the epitome of knowledge, right? And
Right.
they've been purposely pushed down this cattle chute that's been presented in front of them like it was a discovery, and then
Yeah.
they've been totally put in the opposite direction of where the real information is. Absolutely.
And also, like, it's a normal human reaction that people would be outraged by discovering these things, right? I don't fault people for this, right? Like,
Hmm.
there always need to be people who push back against evil things being done to people and whatnot, right? But once you're sort of in that emotional reaction space or the resistance space or the like, I'm gonna get justice for this space, again, all in some on many levels noble endeavors, right? You're sort of learning about what it is that is actually being done with this and why that kind of disappears, right? It's like
Right.
the moment you have the endocrine system activated, the hormonal surge of like outrage or disgust or anger or whatever it is, your ability to just sort of observe or to think clearly is completely cut off, right?
Right.
And you're, even if you're doing something that's noble, like it's the people who are perpetrating these things, quote unquote, for science, are able to like get the football all the way down the field while you're like at the weird place looking for the pedophile
What
instead,
100%.
right?
And I can give you another example of that. And I think they're doing this to the people who are perpetrating it. You remember when they were talking about politicians being into soul cooking and
Yes,
all
fair.
that,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that crap?
yeah.
Well, I think what's really going on there, and I really believe this, and I studied it for a while, is I think they're being duped as well.
Yep.
So that here's how you do this without telling them about anything. You get them that you tell these politicians that this real witch or whatever that's going to help you out, right? And
Mhm.
take care of your enemies, and you only have to pay them, $250,000 or whatever the fee is, right? And
Yeah.
they get them there and they go through this ritual, right? After that, the person that the or the people that the politician was going after is targeted with this weaponry. All
Mhm.
this crazy stuff happens to them. They claim that supernatural things are happening to them. They commit suicide or die or get
Mhm.
locked up or whatever. And then what they can do is take the money from these people, do these rituals that aren't real, hit them with the tech, and never disclose how it was really done. And the politician or whoever is involved walks away thinking it is totally real,
Right.
you know. And that works. I mean, that would absolutely work on somebody. I mean, if you go to some witch and put a hex on two people, let's say in your neighborhood, and they both die or go crazy within a week, you'd
Right.
be like, wow, this person's the real deal. When the whole time it was just it was just a scam, really.
I mean,
But that,
I think that's what, like, all of these quote operations and projects that we think we've been uncovering, right, are really covers for deep science that's being conducted with this scab on top that you can sort of peel off anytime, right?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
So,
it's all a cover. So when I hear these stories from somebody, online, whatever, I immediately go to the idea that this is a cover for another story,
right.
that's out there. So, and that's exactly how I look at it. And unless a lot of it rings true, and then I might start considering it. But the puzzle pieces have to fit. And a lot of these things that these people believe, the puzzle pieces just do not fit together, you
So
know?
generally, the only time you get something where like the puzzle pieces really fit together is on the rare occasion where the person reporting all the craziness is an actual threat to the system.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
I've seen that. And I've
Right.
really seen that with people. And usually something happens, or they're constantly being, messed with one way or another, you know, and that can be like the case of Michael Cravey, where
Right.
eventually he got taken out. And his case is really weird to me, and it still blows my mind because at the time he had like 400 subscribers or something, not even, you
Yep.
know, and the kid was like talking on forums, to people like on Godlike Productions or whatever. Like he was not big. And it's really weird to me how he got taken out. To this day, I still think about that all the time because he must have been onto something uh, that maybe he wasn't talking about yet, you know, because everything that he talked about was pretty pedestrian. And they had been, but point being is that they were doing the same kind of stuff to him that I've experienced. Like they started sending him emails from like an Arab name that could be on like a terror watch list, right?
Yeah.
And then if he continues to correspond with this person, he'll be considered an associate,
Right.
and he can be put on the list too.
Yep.
And I've had that exact same thing happen. And when I quit responding, they would just blow my inbox up with, hundreds of emails, say, you respond to me, respond to me, respond to me. That kind of stuff would happen. And it does when someone's onto something, really onto something, that they will start doing things like that. And that's why it's usually a dead giveaway. Totally.
So, okay. So one of the things that like it seems like is the all of these operations, projects, blah, 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 with very seductive narratives that people get caught up in for a long time. Once you've like drilled past that, once you've gotten over your outrage and stopped being tricked by all of this stuff, like when you dig down, when you drill way down, it seems to always lead back to things related to experiments around like like radioactive substances, radiation, or like chemical and biological weaponry and bacteria and things like that.
Yep.
Right. At the bottom of almost every rabbit hole, you'll find some connection to the nuclear and bioweapons sciences. And I actually think it's available in all of the mainline stories about the sort of foundation of artichoke and MK Ultra, but people override that part of the story because it's not as seductive as this idea of gaining the ability to control someone's mind with psychedelics or chemicals or whatever it is, right? Like
Right.
that's so entrancing to people that they overlook the fact that the one of the first people who it's believed had that happen to them was trying to blow the whistle on the chemical and biological weapons program.
Right.
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 And so like what happens is something can be true, right? And sure, like all the politicians are corrupt. Some of them are probably, a lot of them are definitely perverts. Some of them are probably pedophiles. That all can be true, and it can still not be the point. And so if you, right, so getting people,
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's
getting,
just one. It's a benefit. It's one arm.
yes,
You know,
right,
it's
yes,
just one arm, and it's what I would call. I had an octopus graphic
yep,
or that I used to explain why somebody would do one thing, because it does. They realize that it has, at least 8 different purposes that they can use. Absolutely.
right. And getting someone distracted with something that's true is much more effective than getting someone distracted with something that's false, because something that's false is usually, you find that out pretty quickly and then it's not a good distraction anymore. But if it's true, then you keep digging into it because there has to be more. There's more to understand and blah, 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 right?
Exactly. Totally.
Yeah.
And that's why when I don't know how to say this, during 2020, they came up with after the quote unquote pandemic, they came up with a thing, I'll just say the shot, right?
Right.
And everything now
It's
is
because
being
of the
blamed.
shot.
Yeah, everything that I like, if you go to BitChute, it's like the shot chant, like the shot platform, like everything is about the shot. And it's like, man, you're not realizing that, what they're seeing in these blood samples and what is happening to people is the exact same thing that has happened to people for years and years and years. The only difference is it's being put straight into the vein instead of on the skin and in the gut and everything else. I mean, what they have seen and pulled out, they're talking about, that's where everybody started suddenly talking about graphene. And I
Yep.
was like, oh my God, you guys are all talking about graphene now? What is going on here? But that's perfect. I figured it out. It was perfect. And all of these shills that I knew were shills that were not real people that were in it for the conversation or whatever were out there posting about the shot. They wanted people talking about that,
Yep. Yep.
right? And
Yep.
that was really strange to me, finding that and seeing these people that I knew were not real posters that I had followed and studied for a while, because it's a big interest of mine of how this works, the subversion of everything. And they really were out there posting all about this, trying to get people into it, and get people hooked on it as a reason. And it's the same kind of thing, exact same kind of thing.
I'm continually shocked at how many people that I generally otherwise consider to be fairly sophisticated in their knowledge and understanding of things still get looped in hardcore, like on the narratives around that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because it's
so
easy.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's that everybody started, here you are, you got this, for example, like I had this small channel talking about these things and no one wanted to hear about it. It was they thought it was Star Trek science fiction or something, right? And then they pushed these people down the cattle chute of shots,
Mm.
and all of a sudden they're all talking about what I've been talking about, but related to shots, right?
Right.
So it's pretty brilliant, really, what they did to these people.
Well, you can
They
get
got
a,
it.
like a one-stop shop answer for everything, right? That stops people from having to think farther and wider and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah, because it's been happening for God, you know, years, except for uh the sudden dropping of people. Other than that, the rest of the stuff has been happening for a long, long time. They just weren't paying attention or didn't want to hear it, you
Right.
know. So yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So, okay, so we kind of went on a long aside there, but the point of that was we had talked about the Schumann resonance, right? And
Mhm.
for me, like all of these sort of informational maps, like it's always interesting when I can tie it down to like a physical location that actually exists and the map tells me where it's coming from because it's Schumann is right there, right?
Right, right.
Right. So the whole thing with resonance, right? Like you hear a lot of people talking about vibration and frequency, and you have to raise your vibration, and there's a truth frequency, and it's sort of this new ageization
Yeah,
of
yeah. They
of
they
that.
really gobbledygooked it. Totally.
But I've become, in the last 2 years, like it's something that I've always tangentially been aware of. And when I see tangential, I don't mean like way off to the side. I mean like close in, like how you look at your side view mirror. But again, I had still like, even myself sometimes has been pulled into like the more seductive narratives about things. But I really started paying attention in a different way a couple of years ago to sound and light, right? And
That's important. Absolutely. There's a reason why they don't teach you anything about it in school, you know?
and how
No,
they make you feel, how
yep,
how they make you feel, what you think about when exposed to different layers, levels, whatever, whatever you want to, however you want to refer to that is, the way you feel, the thoughts that you have, and like the understanding of how some of that is sort of either being produced or certainly like influenced, right?
sure, sure.
And then, I think about like the massive and forever long success of the industries of theater and Hollywood and music and, concerts and opera and all of that kind of stuff. And that's what all of that has been. And it's kind of on some level, like we're all on a giant, state sound stage,
Oh, sure.
right?
But isn't it amazing that that it was much better? The intent and the overall result was much better when we didn't have all this interference around us, as far as music and production and all this, it is in frequency. Go ahead, and I'll expand on that in a little bit.
Well, I think it's kind of like when people probably first started doing it, right? They started doing their plays or having their concerts. And, then they realized, oh, well, we can improve the quality of this or the experience of this by sort of creating an isolated sound environment or using intelligent lighting or whatever it is. And that will sort of help people to block out the normal noise of their regular world and just completely be encompassed in this experience. And it really was about that experience. And then at a certain point, it became, oh no, the fact that we can really manipulate people's thoughts, feelings, emotions, everything, even their physiology, through what we can do with the manipulation of sound and light, became more to the point than trying to create the experience of the story that was being told through the play or the movie or the music.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it can be used for all sorts of things, including educational purposes for misinformation.
Right.
It's gnarly. Totally understood.
And so I started paying attention to like when I see like little bits of sort of anomalous optical sort of occurrences, right? Or when I hear like something sounds a little different than everything else, right? When there's like a certain sound that draws my attention, right?
Hmm.
Or when sometimes I hear something that like it's weird, I can't quite tell where it's coming from, right? And that has helped me, like usually I can begin to track it down to like what is causing that anomaly, right? And when you sort of track it down to the source, you see how like there's two things intersecting, which would be like kind of like what you're talking about with piggybacking or interference, right?
Hmm.
Sort of two things sort of cross-sectioning or interacting or coming to like a junction or a fulcrum point that in some weird way is like rearranging everything else around it, right? It becomes like a new sort of loci, like point of loci, right? Like center point for like the sort of field around it. And
Right.
and I started looking at this for things probably related more to maybe the inner room secrets of Masonic lodges and whatnot. But then I started recognizing it like with everything, right? Like if you catch something glimmering out of the corner of your eye and then you go over there and stand where the light is hitting that sort of little piece of quartz crystal in the rock, like everything looks and sounds different from that point,
Sure.
right? And then I think about a lot of your early work when you would talk about sort of the human body being turned into like a crystal radio, and then there's like a, you know, if it's like a dirty board because of all this other stuff that's in it, right? You have this like entire sort of clearinghouse of sounds and sensations that a person can come to believe is the actual world around them, because for all intents and purposes it is.
Sure. But it also, that's what's you know, like you could look at the Schumann resonance as sort of like Earth's communication system or Earth's internet, right? And then which we are already sensitized to. What makes me is so ominous about the sensitizers and stuff that are put in everybody is it seems that everybody has become sensitive to the frequencies that aren't natural, you know, that they wouldn't be sensitized to in the first place, you know. And that's where it gets where it does get nefarious, is because we are already sensitized to ELF. I mean, I think it's the reason why we dream to the Schumann, you know. I think it affects our dreams, it affects everything, it affects consciousness. And I think that that's what they discovered about consciousness, that is such a big deal to them right now, is they realized that the Schumann is actually Earth's internet and communication system. And it actually, you know, it what's the word? It interacts with every living thing. So, you know, when you got your own, they always want to make their own. And that's what it comes down to.
Right.
They want to make, they're like, we can do this better, you know.
Right.
And they can't, and things go bad, you know. So there's always going to be somebody that's trying to do this with anything, whether it's biological, whether it's frequency, whether it's whatever. There's always going to be somebody that wants to mess with stuff that they shouldn't mess with.
So I've often heard you talk about, right, generally the way like a lot of the narratives go are that there's like nano chips or small microprocessors that somehow have made their way into people's bodies and things like that, right? It's all like direct and intentional, like in terms of like a specific it being done to someone specifically or whatever it is, right? I've heard you like, while I've heard you like refer to the things that end up in people's bodies because we have all kinds of crazy shit in our environment, or the food we eat, or the products we use, or whatever, like you have always really been much more focused on bacteria and fungus than sort of, you know, manufactured pieces of metal or
Absolutely.
technology.
Yep.
Do you think, okay, so do you think that a fungal overgrown scenario where like there's fungal overgrowth or bacterial overgrowth in someone's body is just a better environment to support said nanotechnologies? Or do you think said nanotechnologies are like kind of, they might be there, they might not, they're not really the point? The bacteria and the fungal networks themselves can do the same thing.
I think that because a lot of people get caught up in the microchip game, and they're convinced that there's a microchip on them somewhere, you know, and they get their bodies x-rayed and whatever. And that's not to say that they didn't do this in the past, but I'm following their work, you know, the work that these people are doing. And what these people are doing right now is they are obsessed with bacteria, with algae, and with fungus, because it powers lights, it powers anything, and it doesn't need, the human body doesn't need that much power to be manipulated or changed. You know, it doesn't, it runs on millivolts, you know. And and I'm positive that the body is being used. That is the goal, not the nanotech or the smart dust. I
Yep.
think eventually it won't be anything really really man-made. It will be manipulated, but it will be nature. It'll be a manipulation of nature, because this stuff can get in you. Like, let's say that what they call Morgellons, which is doing the same kind of thing. It's just an arm of this. Once it goes lymphatic, it gets into the knee, or it gets into whatever. It can build all those fibers and everything within the fluid of the knee and attach to something. It just like a pregnancy, it's going to find the weakest point, attach there, and then start growing. That's really what it is, right?
Mhm.
So let's say that somebody gets this, let's say they get an x-ray and there's a mass in their knee, and it's a little square or something, and they're convinced that there's a microchip in them, that somebody physically put it in there. No, this is better. It got in there and it grew what it needed to grow, you know, and that's totally what it's doing. And a
Mhm.
lot of people have pulled these, back in the day, let's say the 60s and 70s, people did once in a while find, something that was clearly man-made in their body, or looked like a BB, or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
But this is, these people are pulling this stuff out of them. And if you look at, the stuff that people have had pulled out of them, it does look like a biological mass, and it does look identical to what would grow on somebody with Morgellons, like on their scalp or in their ear or in a cut or whatever. You know, it has the same look. It's just a bunch of tangled fibers and something inside it, and it like a dried liquid mass around it. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And that's exactly the same look as Morgellons, or one of these Morgellons type infections. Same thing. So I totally believe that it's going to be nature. Totally.
So, okay. So the reason I ask you this, right, is I
Mhm.
had this really interesting sort of insight recently, right?
Mhm.
Like it was an insight that I started having a couple of years ago, but sometimes like you start your thinking on something and you see it one way, and then by the time you get to not the end of your thinking on it, but once you've sat with it a while, like you see it slightly differently, which doesn't necessarily like um mean that the original thought wasn't valid. It's just like a more sophisticated version of it, right?
Mhm.
So I'm sure, well, not everyone, but I'm assuming that you've had a psychedelic experience or two in your life. Yes.
Yeah, I can
Okay.
I can talk about that
All
now.
right. So when like when I noticed this when I first began having psychedelic experiences, which for me first were well, actually I noticed it the first time I ever did drugs, which was cocaine, but I really noticed it in a way that I could pay closer attention to when the first time I did ecstasy, and then acid was a little different, but when I started doing mushrooms, right? Like I noticed how that like it made like everything sort of sounded and looked a little different. Like it wasn't like I was hearing or seeing things that like weren't there, but the colors were more saturated, the sounds were like either more clear, or like certain parts of the sound were more highlighted where other parts were more recessed.
Mhm.
And I noticed that immediately, but at that time I was not thinking about this stuff. It was just like, oh, okay, like I know the drugs are coming on because suddenly everything is like very clear and loud, or whatever, right? Um, but a couple of years ago, I had this weird experience where I went to a party about 3 miles from my house, right? And I was there and I decided to take a little bit of mushrooms. And when I say a little, like I mean a little, like if I'm taking them out in public with people, I don't, you got to be able to function in case something happens you're not expecting, right?
Right,
I
totally.
just took a small amount. And then for some reason, like just a few minutes after I took them, I decided I wanted to leave. I just decided like I don't actually think I want to be at this party, or I don't like it here, or I'm bored. I don't know what it was that I've never done that before, like taken the drugs and then decided to leave, right? So I was like, fortunately, you know, like it was just a few miles home and they hadn't hit me yet. So I drive home, right? And by the time I'm home, they're starting to hit me. So I just lay down on the couch and enjoy the mushrooms on my couch with my eyes closed, right?
Hmm.
But what was fucking weird was that I could still hear the music from the party. Like, I don't mean like I remember what the music sounded like. I mean, like I could literally hear the music still being played.
Wow.
Right? And 3 miles
Wow.
is close enough that if something was transmitting that, right? Like it's not like it's not from a straight line, it would probably be closer than 3 miles. Like straight line, you know, if you direct path would probably have been shorter, right? But
Sure.
it wasn't like I was hearing it like loud, right? But I could hear it kind of the way you could hear it if like a neighbor is playing music or a car is going by with kind of a stereo, right? And this like happened for the remainder of the time that I was laying on the couch tripping, like right, it just continued, and it was like different music the whole way through, just like you would hear the DJ set at the party, right? So while I was laying there, I started like when I was coming to a point where I was like kind of not so much interested in watching the things behind my eyes anymore. I started like looking up the idea on my phone of like mushrooms as being like speakers, right? Like some kind of, you know, like monitor or speaker or something. And I found some interesting videos where people had attached their synthesizers or their sound machines to mushrooms and listened to the music that like mushrooms have their own sound, right?
Right.
There were some
Right.
kind of some interesting videos around that that made me think that like, okay, I was probably onto something, that there was something to it, but like it wasn't exactly what I was thinking about. And like everything, like you have your thoughts when you're on mushrooms or acid, and then you think about them for a couple of days after, and then you just kind of go on with things, right?
Sure. Sure.
But and I always have an interesting experience on mushrooms, and a lot of it is dependent on location and lighting and sound. Recently, I had this experience that was sort of devoid of like some of the woo that I usually get into, if only because I've seen and heard some of these things so many times that like I'm not awed by them anymore, and I can just coldly and dispassionately observe them and assess what's happening, right? So
Right.
I'm in a place, I've taken a little bit of mushrooms. Like I hardly felt like I was tripping at all this time. And but what I did notice was that when I like the place that I was at, like the sound for my own particular liking, I'm very selective about sound for hearing techno music on. Like it wasn't the worst sound ever. Like there was enough sound, but it wasn't like sort of the clarity or quality. And it didn't have like I love listening to techno on a function one sound system because there's just so much sort of like like it feels transdimensional, right?
Right. Right.
And this system was more just like very loud, right? And very bass heavy, but it didn't have all of that sort of interdimensional motion and
Yeah. Like the
sort of
brilliance
clarity
of
of
it.
sound that I like. But what I noticed when I took the mushrooms was the mushrooms almost acted like a tuner. Like the music sounded better, right? It felt like it corrected the parts about the sound that I wasn't liking. And
Right. Right.
you know how like a good DJ or a good sound system, you can adjust things to make it sound how it's supposed to in some cases, or in other cases, make the DJ or the performer sound better than they actually are, right? Like you can
Totally.
do things with the tuning and the equalizing and the raising of certain levels and dropping of other levels to make it sound really good. And that's what it felt like was happening. And then I started to think, you know how people like take all of these like mushrooms for health, right? They're called adaptogenic mushrooms. Do you know what an adaptogen is?
Yeah, basically. But yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so an adaptogen is something that helps your body do whatever it needs to do to sort of lower or relieve the amount of stress it's under,
Hmm.
right? So it doesn't have a specific thing it does. It goes in and finds out what your body needs it to do, and then it does that. Right. And that's kind
Mhm.
of what it felt like the mushrooms did to, right? Like it felt like it adjusted the sound system. It made me inside of my own ears hear the music in a way that I would prefer. Right.
Right. And you were focused on that. Was that at this party?
The different one, not the one, the first one,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Different, but different three, right? But okay, so I was noticing that, and I had been thinking about like adaptogens, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. If like fungal networks can tune you into specific sounds, right? Or even just make you aware of sounds that you're not normally aware of, right? And when I hear you talk about like fungal networks, right? Like I'm talking about the ones in magic mushrooms. And for me, it was like, okay, this is a good experience. Like the music didn't sound great. I took it and it sounded better. It's like maybe that's the magic of magic mushrooms, is it sort of gives you the eyes to see and the ears to hear. And that can be like on a metaphysical or spiritual level, or just on a sort of auditory, acoustic, or optic visual level, right? Like
Yeah, like a sensitizer.
it puts on a light show for you behind your eyes. It makes the music sound better. Like that's all cool. But I also notice that sometimes I hear like and see those things that are like the secondary layer that people who are supposedly hearing things or seeing things, right, that they claim to be seeing, but I just only see like the outline or hear like the echo of them, and I'm aware that it's because I've taken something, right? But imagine if people have fungal networks inside of themselves that they don't know are there, or on their skin specifically. Like people don't think that they're like, you do a really good job of showing how some of these patches on people's skin are evidence of that. So what if there was like an adaptogenic fungal acoustic sound system on someone's skin or in their ears or in their sinuses that is like tuning up that secondary layer of sound, right? That when you've taken psychedelics, you're hearing it because you've taken something. But if you don't think you've taken something, you're thinking either it's really there or you're thinking you're losing your mind,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah,
right?
that's what happens to people because they don't know and they don't put it together. Like people walk away and they go, a lot of these people are hearing stuff and they're like, oh yeah, and I've got, eczema too, or I've got dandruff, or I've got that. They're not putting it together what's actually going on, that they're infected and they become a speaker in a sense,
It
to
seems
these
like
frequencies.
it seems like to me, like the fungal stuff seems auditory, and some of the like algae or bacterial stuff seems more optical, right? Like a more light based,
Sure,
right?
sure. And
And
they can
so,
give off light too, like Shuanella can
right, they give off light and they receive light, right?
right,
Right.
right.
And so it's almost like turning everybody's body into some sort of two-way optic and sonic system. You can receive, you can like, right, it can be used on you, but also you can project it. So on some level, yes, it's your neighbor doing it to you, but he's not doing it intentionally. He has a fucking sound system inside of his environment as well that he doesn't know is there, that frequencies are bouncing off of, that make you think it's coming from that direction, but it's not him doing it. He's just another node on the same network you are.
Well, that could absolutely be true. And that's what I've tried to tell people about. People that think they're being followed when the people aren't doing anything overt to them. Like they called it, what do they used to call it? Mobbing.
Yeah.
And like, so let's say that I always use this as like an example. Let's say Home Depot. Somebody goes to Home Depot and like 20 other people show up at the exact same time, and these people think they're being followed,
Right.
but that would be evidence of a very good advertising or subliminal system to convince everybody to show up at Home Depot all the time, or at a particular time. So these people all show up at the same time, and one person out of there thinks that they're being mobbed or followed, and they were all unconsciously going there to buy something. right?
Right.
Or McDonald's or wherever it is. And it's the same kind of thing. They don't realize that they're just part of a network as well. You know, that could absolutely be true. Totally.
I mean, and this is
Totally,
even
totally.
like we're focused on sound and light because of the things that we like, right? But there's you could do this with like smell too and pheromones. And right, you think about like if you go into like McDonald's or Subway, there's like a McDonald's smell or a
Oh,
Subway
sure.
smell. And so like you hear people, and it seems almost impossible for you or I to understand maybe, but people who like can't go buy a McDonald's and not go in and get something. Like I've heard people tell me that like they think McDonald's coffee is the best coffee in the fucking world. I'm like, are you out of your goddamn mind?
Wow.
But if that smell ticks some pheromone or something in their system, right? That is how they're drawn towards something, right? As
Right.
then, you know, then I can see how like that's a whole other sort of layer of this. And some people are more optically or sonically driven, and others are more driven by their taste buds or sense of smell or texture, right? Feel.
Sure. Sure.
Okay, so
It's
this idea of adaptogenic sound makes sense to you.
Oh yeah, and it
Okay.
let me give you an example, and it doesn't have to do with fungal, but this just literally just happened. I just found out about it. Um, and this is really crazy, and it relates back to the pharmaceutical industry. Um, and I can't give a lot of details on how it happened. Someone I know, their mom is being treated right now in the hospital during different visits for something physical, and they were given, now they don't have uh any mental issues at all, none, never have. They've been really meat and potatoes people, that's what we'll call them. And she was given a bipolar drug, as because apparently it does something else if you're
Yep.
dealing with this physical, whatever. So they prescribed this bipolar drug to her. She took it, and by the next night she was in bed. Swear to God, uh she started hearing buzzing in her ears really loud. And then she started hearing birds in the middle of the night, like 2 a.m. Started
Mhm.
hearing birds, and then she started hearing people talking. And the people, I just released a video on this, you're right. And she started hearing people talking outside of her house. It sounded like it was in the backyard or the driveway, out
Uh-huh.
with the birds. This all started happening. She realized that it was the drugs, and then wouldn't take them, and then it went away within like 2 days.
Yep.
She thought it was permanent and was all freaked out. The hospital tried to lower her dose, but she wouldn't take it, and then it just went away. So in the same aspect, those sounds are always around her, and it's a great example. Those sounds are always around her.
Always there.
Right. But her taking that drug instantly sensitized her like a fungus would,
Okay, so
right?
I want to expound on this idea in just a minute when we move over into the second segment, because maybe we'll go pretty far with it because you kind of laid a good groundwork there. But before we do that, tell me, was the drug she was taking lithium?
No, I have it written down somewhere, you know what? I can find it. Oh, where did I write that down at? You know what? I can text and get the name of the drug. But
Okay.
it was just a typical one of these bipolar drugs. Uh,
The reason I ask is because lithium is one of the bipolar drugs, and at this point, like lithium is the thing that is most commonly being used to make batteries for a lot of the new like
right,
right.
right,
And
right.
so a battery, like if it's generating energy, it's vibrating, right, at a different sort of frequency, and it's sensitizing, right? If you're more energized, if you're sort of ticked up, then it's kind of like being on drugs, or right, like you have
Sure,
a second, like a more sensory perceptive situation going on in your system. And if it, especially, it would be really interesting if like everybody on that drug sort of in a specific location. Remember the stories like that there was lithium in our water and stuff like that? Like there
Yep.
could almost be like a lithium based network in a specific area that's like communicating with each other, right?
Sure. And that would be right. And lithium as a lithium particle are all tuned to the same frequency,
Yeah.
you know? So I actually just released a video on this too. And so if a man-made particle was made, let's say the drug, right? And it's dispersed throughout the body, and all the particles in that drug are all tuned to the same frequency, you're going to
Yep.
start hearing this stuff
Yep.
around you that's always there, but you never
Yep.
noticed before.
It's always
And
there. It's always,
right.
yeah.
And that's what people don't get. And that's why people get freaked out and they think they're being beamed and whatever. Like all it took was this woman, an older woman, mind you, to be sensitized to it for 12 or 24 hours. And she began hearing it. That's all it took. And then all of a sudden she's hearing what, has driven, thousands and thousands of people insane, more than thousands. And it's very strange to me because that is a drug that they're giving to people that are supposed to be bipolar,
Right.
and then now suddenly they're saying that bipolar people can hear voices, you know, and can have schizoaffective disorder or whatever. They're always changing and evolving it. And it's very strange that they're giving a drug to them that is causing this. And I know for a fact, I know these people really well. And I know for a fact that she has never had,
Yeah.
any issues at all in the, 65, 70 years of her life.
Yeah.
So that's insane.
Well, I mean, it's almost like would it, I have over time heard of the rare person who has bipolar disorder and takes lithium and doesn't like it because it makes them fat and lazy, but it does stop them from having the bipolar acting out that they had before, right?
Right. Right.
And but I almost wonder if someone who doesn't have quote unquote said condition, again, pretending that that's a real thing and not just the sort of expansive human possibilities, right? That if someone who
Right.
doesn't have that condition takes it, that it literally creates some of the same scenario that it stops in someone who actually does.
Right.
Right? It's
Right.
almost like it's this weird knob that is going to be turned, and it's either going to be turned on or turned off by that element.
Right.
Does that make
Oh,
sense?
yeah, yeah. And I just remember the name of the drug. It's olanzapine.
Olanzapine. And okay, so
Yep.
that okay. I mean, I want to see what that is.
Yeah, check it out.
Olanzapine. Okay, I see it right here. All right. Olanzapine is used to treat schizophrenia. So it's not a bipolar drug,
Oh,
it's a
wow.
drug.
Wow.
I guess, but they are using it for bipolar now too. It may also be used alone or with other medicines for like lithium or valproate to treat mania or mixed episodes that is part of bipolar disorder. Okay, so they use it for schizophrenia or for the manic portion of bipolar, not for the depressed portion. Okay, that's
Oh,
interesting.
man.
The schizophrenia thing, and we'll talk about this when we move over into the patrons hour. The schizophrenia thing is a fascinating topic to sort of dig into. But it's
Oh, yeah.
interesting, like this idea though of like the almost reverse. You know how you hear people who like have ADD or are hyper, and I can like attest to this on some level, right? That for them, if they take Adderall, it makes them more calm. Whereas for someone who's normal, when they take Adderall, like it's like being on speed for them,
Yep. Yep.
right? So it's I wonder if a lot of these medications are the same way, that there's like a knob, and when you apply this element to it, it's either going to turn it one way or the other, dependent on which way it was already turned.
Right. Yeah. And
Right?
I did some experimenting with white rabbiting myself with medications that had that type of stuff in it, or like Sudafed, things that had like speed properties to it,
Yeah.
right? Just to see like what would happen. And I would see, and like I can totally see how people would experience absolutely strange stuff on this stuff if they didn't need to take it,
Yeah.
right? Um, the speed stuff, because this, that happens to a lot of meth users and it gets discounted. And I even have to discount it to some extent because, we don't understand exactly what it does. But with the chemicals that are in methamphetamine,
Yep.
these people are using it now, are getting meth, what they call meth like psychosis
Right.
immediately. And it's working just like that medication that this woman took.
Yep.
So she takes this stuff and 12, 24 hours later, she's got buzzing in her ears,
Yep.
which is artificial tinnitus. And then she's got voices and birds, people talking, not talking to her, but they were talking outside the house. And then these people that use meth use it, they get freaked out,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what we were talking about before. Their blood pressure, everything's already jacked. And then they start thinking that somebody is following them or talking to them.
Yeah.
And then it gets more and more intense. And then they've got them, it's like entrainment almost immediately.
Yeah.
So that stuff seems to work as like an instant sensitizer or entrainment system, like immediately. It's crazy.
I think
Where
it,
before, I'm
yeah,
sorry, I was just going to say, where before, for somebody to have quote unquote meth psychosis, it took a little while. Where now people are just going like boom, like 0 to 60, and they're there.
I
Yeah.
mean, I've heard people, so I did my fair share of meth in my day,
Mhm.
right? And like I did meth on and off for 15 years, and on occasions I stayed up for 2 weeks, right?
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I never got to the place that some people get to the first time they ever use it now, right? In
Right.
terms of
Right.
like, sure, like I've had the full expanse of experiences, right, on them, but it was kind of like something that built up over time gradually, or was explainable by some other circumstance that was sort of meeting this experience, right? Or even when something crazy would be happening, I would still have that awareness in my own head that I had taken something. And so some of this was likely either the figment of my imagination or like some very distorted version of reality. And so I should not act upon it. Right.
Right.
And now I hear of people who like take it one time and are never the same again.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I know people that I talk to on a regular basis, like old friends and stuff that are out on the West Coast. We don't have meth in Michigan like they do on the West
Like
Coast.
California.
It's
Yeah.
Yeah, it's never been prevalent here ever, and it's kind of weird, but it just never has been. Um, so on the people on the West Coast, I know people that have used it, and it's been months or a year, and here's the strange part: they might not hear voices or people talking 24 hours a day. But if they get in a vehicle, like one of them was driving a truck for a little while,
Yep.
and when he gets in the truck, that engine of that truck is creating all kinds of noise.
Yep.
And as we've talked about, this system, it auto gains the volume, auto gains on noise around it. So if
Yep.
somebody is using a blender or a vacuum or a shower or whatever, the sound actually amplifies. So they can hear that while they're driving a truck. They can't hear it every word, but they can hear it mumbling and talking while
Right.
they're driving a truck. And then when they get out, they can't hear it.
Yeah.
But that's insane because it's still in them. They're unentraining, so to speak, but they can still hear it when they're in a truck. And it's been months since they've used. So that's crazy.
Well, I think a lot of this is also, and this goes for both like drug, whether it's meth or other drug related hyper awareness or psychosis, however you choose to look at it. And also things that they call schizophrenia or bipolar, that
Mhm.
it does oftentimes seem to be location based, right? That somebody goes, like somebody has these experiences in the same location over and over again, but when they're not in that location, they don't have it. Like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
right? And that would be the same thing, because it's what's in the environment, how things are arranged, what, you know, it could even be like what elements are under the ground. Are they on a bed of quartz? Are they on a bed of limestone, or you know, lithium bed, or whatever it is, right? And for some,
Right.
that area is more activated, and you know, like, because it doesn't make sense that somebody would only be crazy in one place but not crazy in another place.
Oh, absolutely. And the doctors never look at this stuff.
Right.
The whole thing doesn't make sense when you look at it.
Not at all. Not at all.
So what they're trying to say is basically is that you have like this uh the equivalent of a conjoined twin that's in your brain that is talking, but it's harassing and making fun of you all the time. And it's a bunch of, you know, it can be a bunch of different voices or one person, and it's making fun of you and picking on you all the time. And it is the most absurd idea ever. And I've met real, you know, real schizophrenics in my life that I believe were probably infected with something or had some other illness that was causing it. But uh those schizophrenics don't act like that. They don't,
Right.
those schizophrenics didn't hear voices like that before. They thought that you know, you could talk about guitars and then mayonnaise, and then they would string it together. You know, that's
Yeah.
how schizophrenics operated. Like I totally remember a guy telling me that he was going to design the guitar the right way, and that the notes would go up as you moved your fingers towards the tuners of the guitar, rather than go up as you went up the neck. And this guy there was something wrong with him, right? And he was, everything that you talked about, he would tie it all together. It was like this weird linear thought pattern where he would every one of them that I ever met would tie everything together that you talked about in front of them. And then they would make up some story around it and how they were going to change things around that, or how something was wrong with that, or it was some type of somebody was doing somebody wrong within all that, you know. But it wasn't anybody you know, having their brain tell them that they were a punk bitch or whatever, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's just retarded. Like it's the whole idea is just, it's insane, but they want you to believe it, you know. So
Yeah. All right, so let's do this. Let's move over into the patron segment, where we will go, as we have said before, an inch farther and a foot deeper, or whatever, right?
yeah, right.
Into whatever we're becoming balls deep in here. But before we do that, let people know where they can find your work. And I know you've never been a person who makes any money, or you know, asks for support or anything like that. But if there's anything people can do to support you in a way you're comfortable with, or whatever it is, let people know, please. I know that whether it feels like it to you or not, like there's a lot of people out there that are super appreciative of your work, and would like to help you in any way they can.
Right on. Yeah, I've got a channel on Rumble. You can just look up my name, Lookoutfa Charlie. It'll show up. I've got a channel on BitChute, Lookoutfa Charlie. I've got my channel on YouTube. That's the main channel that I upload to while I have it, is Lookoutfa Charlie. I've got a website, lookoutforcharlie.com. But the problem with that is I keep fixing the SSL certificates and contacting them, and they go through the trouble of fixing everything so the website works. And then 2 days later, it gets broke again. And it's been happening for years now. So when it's up, it's up. But once in a while, I put a donate thing under my videos. And then if you see that, you can donate. But yeah, I usually don't run on donations at all. Like I've got 2 or 3 people that donate on a regular basis. And that's really cool. It's helped a lot. But it does help me buy gear and things that I'm doing to sort of try to figure certain things out. Like right now, I'm still raising up money to buy these. Remember the what was his name? Robert Card case, where he was a firearms guy, and he had hearing aids put in his ears.
Yes,
And I
yes,
believe they were, yeah, surgical hearing aids, and then he began hearing voices right after that.
yeah,
Pretty not suspect at all, right? So
right.
um I'm right now I'm saving up money, and I'm going to actually wear hearing aids and wire in a way to record this so that I can actually document
Oh, that's
if I
fascinating.
yeah, what's hitting me, if I'm hearing anything,
Oh, you're
whatever.
making me have a thought. But I'll tell you on the other side. But oh, okay. Wow. You really are willing to make yourself the guinea pig.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
All right. You guys can find him at lookoutfacharlie.com and that same name on Rumble, BitChute, and YouTube. It's Lookout with T like FA, not for. It's Lookoutfa Charlie.
Yep.
And you guys will see that on the thumbnail for this video. And right now we're going to move over to the supporter segment. You can go to patreon.com/Off Planet Media. There's also an option there for people who are coming over from Charlie's channel to have a free week at multiple different levels there if you like. So if you just want to go over and check out the second half of this, that's cool. If you like what you find there, you can stick around. If not, that's all fine with me too. Or you can go to emilymoyer.locals.com and there I can also give you a promo code. It'll be in the description box below for a free month on locals. And then I'm also at rockfin.com/Emily Moyer. So you guys can head over and listen to the second part of this conversation where things will get weirder and wackier. All right. I think we'll move on over there now and we'll see you there, or you'll hear us there since you don't get to see us today.
Yeah,
All
right.
right. Okay, cool. Let's move on over. Thanks, guys.